Greetings, everyone. Once again, is Motawase sharing with you the authentic truth brought to us by Zulu Lassan in this time, in this era. So, before I begin, I would like to thank Loba, the only unique creator, to have allowed us to know the truth in this time, in this era, by his mysterious son, Zulu Lassan. So, today we're going to be sharing a teaching given to us by Zulu Lassan regarding the ascension of Enoch. Enoch was a prophet is known in what people call the Old Testament. And many pastors, many so-called pastors, many churches, so-called church, have tried to talk or write books on the personage of Enoch, but without success, because in their writings there's a lot of mistakes, there's a lot of contradiction in them, and the so-called pastors don't talk about too much on the personage of Enoch. They don't address him so much because he's a mysterious personage, and they don't want to dive into his story because they're not aware of what happened and what was surrounding the prophet Enoch. So that's why in the classical Bible, it says this in Jude 1:14. In the New International Version, it says this: Enoch, comma, the seventh from Adam, comma, prophesies about them. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones. So here in the current classical Bibles, it says that Enoch is the seventh from Adam. But we have to understand that that is false. That is wrong, because first Moto and Muto, they had many children, more than 7 before Enoch, because the personage known as Cain had a twin sister. Same for Abel. He also had a twin sister. And there were many, many children before the personage of Enoch. So already in the current classical day Bibles, there is contradictions, there is errors. So Enoch was a personage that marked many religions, and it's someone that intrigues, and is mysterious. That's why there's so many books out there on the personage of Enoch, even Enoch Ethiopian, and so on. And they didn't include the Book of Enoch in the current classical day Bibles because some passages in the Book of Enoch contradict the fake Jesus and also reveal the origin of the other races, and they didn't want to include those passages in the so-called classical Bible. In Genesis 5:21, in the New International Version, it says this: when Enoch had lived 65 years, comma, he became the father of Methuselah. So Enoch at 65, he became a father. In our current era, once a person is 65 years old, some people can consider that as old, and that person, for some people, won't be able to father children at that time, or is going to be an advanced age for him to have children, too advanced. But in Genesis, in origin, at that period of time, 65 years old was still considered young, not as today, when if you're 65 years old, the society and some people already consider you as an old person. But at that time, at that era, people lived longer. They lived more than 700 years old, and so on. Now we're going to go in the so-called Jehovah Witnesses Bible. It says this. So in the New Word Translation, it says this. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch continued walking with the true God 300 years. So here in the Jehovah Witness Bible, when they talk about Enoch, they said Enoch continued walking with the true God. But what does he say, the true God and not Jehovah? Already you see there is some sort of confusion going on, because there's a difference between Jehovah, the so-called Jehovah, and the true God. And even in their own Bible, they already distinguish between Jehovah and the true God, because Jehovah is an invention, is a fake, is a demon, is a fake God. And that's why even in their Bible of the so-called Jehovah Witness, they don't say that Enoch continued walking with Jehovah. They said he continued walking with the true God. So even in their own comprehension, in their own understanding, they are flawed, and the true God is not Jehovah. So already the Jehovah Witness, you're witnessing fakeness. You didn't witness anything. Jehovah is a demon. That's what you're witnessing. And that's what you're sharing out there when you go knocking on people's door. You're sharing the bad news that is Jehovah. That's a lie, a demonic news. So Enoch, we have to understand, because we have to put this in perspective in the time. Enoch existed before demons came. That's why as well, you see even in the Jehovah Witness Bible, he says he walked with the true God and not with Jehovah. Enoch existed at a period in time when the whole earth had one language. That means they didn't have many languages, or Hebrew or so on. So the word Jehovah was not pronounced, because those languages came in after. Even the word God was not, that's not the language they were speaking at that time. Even French, English, all that. In the period of time of Enoch, it was one language, and it was the original language. It was the ancient ancestral, ancient Douala. That's the first language on earth. And Enoch existed before the demons, before the flood. So what does Enoch mean? Enoch means initiated and also baptized, because first he is initiated and then he's baptized. So and we have to understand that at that period in time, because some people are going to try to say that Enoch was the only pure person at that time, at this time. He was not. There were many people that were pure, because at that time the demons were not there, the other races were not there, and the murder, except the murder of that Cain did, and after that his descendant, some of them. After that period, after those events, on earth, there were no murder, there were no violence. So people were living in sanctity. They were living in pureness. They were walking according to the word, according to the verb of Loba, of the true Creator. So And we have to understand that Enoch, as is mentioned, begot a son, so he had a descendant. But it's not mentioned about his descendant in the current classical day Bible. It only says that Noah and his family, his sons and his daughter were saved. But it doesn't mention about the descendant of Enoch. In Genesis 5:23, in the current classical day Bible, it says this in the English Standard Version. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years. So thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Genesis 5:24, New Living Translation. Walking in close fellowship with God, period. Then one day he disappeared, comma, because God took him, period. So some fake pastors out there are going to try to say that Enoch was killed, that God killed Enoch because to save him from what will happen with the flood. That's not true. As is mentioned here, according to the current Bible, God took him. That doesn't mean that God killed him. In the Amplified Bible, it says this, and, in bracket, in reverent fear and obedience, Enoch walked with God, and he was not found among men, in bracket, because God took him away to be home with him. So that's a little bit on what the current classical day Bible talk about the personage of Enoch. And as you can see, it's very limited, and they don't talk too much about him because at that period in time, there was not the notion of the other race. So the people who have written the Bible didn't want to dive into the personage of Enoch because they did not know who he really was and from which people did he come from. That's why his origin, and there's a mystery surrounding that personage. So, first, in the current classical day Bible, it says God. God means Zeus, means a divinity, a divine. But the true creator is Loba, and he's above, and he lives inexplicably out of all realities. And his title, the title God is for creatures. And Loba, the creator, is above those titles of gods because he lives and manifests the creation. So he's the creator. And God referred to Zeus, referred to those so-called fake divinity in ancient Greeks. Those are the fake gods. Those are what is considered gods in the mind of the people. And that's what the word the Bible also uses. But as we know, the true creator is Loba. So, to know more about Enoch, we are going to dive into the Book of Enoch that was written by Zululassan in this, the Book of Enoch. So that was the true book, original of Enoch. And Kalata Dubise. His true name is Dubise. And that's the original version. And is from Les Éditions Zululassan. And I will put the link in the description. The book is in French, and I will be translating the passages that I will be reading here in English for us. So, for that, we are going to go in The Book of Enoch by les éditions Zoulassan Kalata Dubise, chapter 1, verse 1081. It says this: Dibangane and Biedi allowed me to see and write my ascension before it took place. Now, here, who is Dibangane and who is Biedi? Those are entities that appeared to Enoch and also showed him spiritual things, visions of things to come. And you can see this in Enoch and in the beginning of his, in verse 31, and you can see this, that's his experience that he had with the entities. And the Bangane and Biedi are entities, like I've mentioned. So they, the entities, allowed me to see and write my ascension before it took place. So how would Enoch be able to write his book on his ascension of his ascension in the great order of things, in the spiritual reality, without, before he go in there? Meaning, how is he gonna write what's his ascension and then write a book, physical book on earth? How does that make sense? How is he gonna experience that? We have to understand that it is the same thing as well when the prophets had visions and prophecies, when they prophesize. When a prophet prophesies on, let's say, a person, that prophet becomes that person, the person of the prophecy. So he also experiences what the person is doing in the vision. So that's how it also happened for Enoch. So when Enoch sees his ascension, he lives it. He lives his ascension. He experiences it. Then he's able to, after, come on earth, write about his ascension. It's like the movie Final Destination. See, in that movie, the person, for example, they will be in, let's say, a bus. And in a sort of vision, he's going to see what will happen, the crash, how the people are going to die. He's going to experience everything. And then he's going to wake up, or he's going to come out of it, of that so-called vision of what he was seeing, and he's going to have the memory, so he's going to know what he saw and how he experienced it. So it's going to be about the same thing on the person of Enoch. He's going to live his ascension, and then he's going to be able to write about it. It's like a premonition. He leaves the scene. It's a sort of displacement without moving, because he's displaced in a sort of his consciousness, and is brought in into another dimension, in a sort of another dimension where time and space no longer has an effect on him. So it's the same person. It's like a dream, but he's brought into a reality where he's out of our current time and space. So he's able to experience things out of time and space because the time is blocked. The visible time is like blocked. He no longer depend on that time. So that's how he's able to enter that vision out of time and space that we currently experience. In Dubise, Enoch, chapter 1, verse 1082, it says this: Dibangane and Biedi manifested themselves again to me, Dubise. Period. So they manifested themselves again to him. Verse 1083. They took me. They took me in order to bring me definitely with them in one of the residents of the great order of things. So they took him and bring him definitely. Now the question is, when he was leaving, did he felt like he was abandoning his family, his children, or his wife at his transformation? No. Because the desire of the flesh of the man, the reasoning is not the same. It changes. It's not like he's going to be missing his family where he goes. Also, in the book of Enoch, Enoch was shown that after his departure, the things that were to come on earth, the things that will take place, the destruction, the demons that are going to appear, and the destruction that will take place, and the fight that will take place on earth. So with all that, how is he then leaving his family, knowing that all this is going to take place on earth regarding, and then the flood and so on? So he saw the evil to come. And we have to understand that Enoch initiated his family. And at that time, like I've mentioned, they were initiates on earth, initiated ones on earth. That means his family were not alone. It's not like his family, the neighbors, were weird and were going against the law. No. They were in a community surrounded by initiated ones. So they were not alone, and he himself, he initiated them. So at the time of Dubise, the whole earth, they were brothers and sisters. They didn't, like I've mentioned, there were no murders, and Now, so like I've mentioned, he prepared his family and left them in a good condition. Enoch chapter 1 verse 1084. But before that, Dibangane uttered a mysterious phrase which is indecipherable. So, but before that, so before his ascension, before he was taken to live definitely, the Bangane uttered a mysterious phrase, which is indecipherable. So, what does it sound like? That's nothing new. It's also the same thing that happened to Moto and Muto, meaning the first man and the first woman. That meaning, when Mutatedi, the entity, told them that the day you will eat that fruit, meaning you will take the teaching of the entity of good and evil, of knowledge of good and evil, you will change and you will die. So the same words that has the ability to give you death also has the ability to give you life. So the same word that tell you you will die can make you live. So, those mysterious words and phrases change Dubise, his condition. Because in some so-called churches, they will try to depict the paradise, they will try to depict what is like in heaven. And they're gonna draw people with their jeans on, with their shoes, with the flesh, physical appearances. That's how they're gonna try to imagine paradise. Because they don't have the knowledge, they don't know truly how it is. They had fake visions and they don't know. It's only sensations. So the flesh cannot enter the great order of things. That's why when the entity, for example, appeared to Mukaisedi, who is known as Daniel, Daniel at some point think when the entity is speaking to him, think he's dying, because the entity is bringing him into another reality that is out of time and space. And because the flesh cannot enter that reality, the body think is dying, is disappearing, is gonna die. Book of Enoch, verse 1085. And all of a sudden, so all of a sudden, I, Dubise, I immediately changed aspect. So he changed aspect after Dibangane uttered those mysterious words. Verse 1086. There, in front of Dibangane and Biedi, I began to metamorphose while transfiguring at the same time. So he was metamorphosing and transfiguring at the same time. It's like a butterfly. To give you a sort of a visual. He was changing. It's because the butterfly, to change, to come out of the cocoon, the butterfly already has that information is in his DNA. And it only takes a period that that thing manifests, and the butterfly metamorphoses and change aspect. So it's the same thing as well for Enoch. That DNA, that thing is already inside him, and it's only that DNA of the source that was also in Moto, the first man, that come out. And it's like, for example, to take another example, like werewolf. You see the person for example, in some movie, at the full moon, he then will become a werewolf at that moment, because that person already has the ability. You see. So Enoch was, so Dubise was transfiguring. So to transfigure is a transformation, to change aspect. When, for example, you're sick and you go to the doctor, to the hospital, they will put you a transfusion. So what is the transfusion? There's a link so that substance, that liquid, can pass through your body. So it's also the same principle. There is a link that passes so that the body can change. So it's the energy of the spirit, because man is made also of three beings. There's the body, the soul, and the spirit. And we know there's a link between the three of them. And at the transfiguration, when he was metamorphosing, when he was changing, transforming, it was the spirit, the energy of the spirit that penetrated into the soul and into the body. So it was the energy of the spirit. And through that link, like I've mentioned, and that allowed the body to change aspect. So that changed the physical and the soul to become one, the fusion. Verse 1087, my face, so that's Enoch, Dubise, my face began to shine like the sun as my clothes gave way to other garments of brilliant light. So his face began to shine like the sun. Can you imagine? A person and his face is shining like the sun. The radiation, the brightness, the energy that he was now made of. Because we know the sun is very powerful. It's very can be dangerous. It's yeah. As my clothes gave way to other garment of brilliant lights. You see, so it was other sort of garments. It was not the jeans and so on. So, which type of clothes was it? It's um, it's a sort of clothes because we know even in the visible on earth there is certain clothes for certain people, meaning for a profession. For example, the people in the Vatican, the so-called Pope, they have certain clothes regarding their profession because they've copied that what was going on in ancient Africa, where the initiates had certain clothes, were clothed a certain way. The Levite. So when the first man fall, Moto, we know that clothes were made for them. So it was in the astral. So clothes were made for their soul as well. So there's clothes, garments for the soul and also for the spirit. So the clothes in the astral that the initiates have are extracted from the original clothes that were given to Moto and Muto. So the first man and the first woman of that substance, of that. So that's the link. Next verse 1088. My whole aspect became like lightning. Period. So his whole aspect was like lightning. You see, when there's lightning, for example, during a storm, you see how not only the noise that it made, but the brightness, how nobody can contain that energy. So, when I say no one, I'm talking about the people in the visible, regular men. And you're told his whole aspect became like lightning. Can you imagine seeing lightning appear to you and speaking to you? You will be terrified of that aspect because you'll see that is so much energy that cannot be contained, that you cannot contain, you cannot rival with. You'll see that it's going to be dangerous. We know, for example, in the Greek mythology, there is Zeus. Zeus is feared by the other fake god in that Greek mythology because he has a weapon, a formidable weapon, and that weapon is the lightning. So Zeus has the lightning. That's the weapon where he's able to fight the other titans. But Enoch, Dubise, his whole being, his whole aspect was like lightning. That means Zeus cannot even rival because Dubise, his whole aspect was like that. So in the visible, no one can reach that power. Verse 1089. My eyes became like fiery flames of fire. So his eyes were like flames of fire. Fiery flames of fire. My arms and feet looked like polished brass, comma, and the sound of my voice had become mysterious. As it was mentioned, when Dibangane uttered those words, they were mysterious. The phrase. Now, Dubise as well, the sound of his voice, even he understood that the sound of his voice was mysterious, has changed. He was no longer the same. The way he was speaking, his being, even his voice, something had changed drastically. It was now mysterious. In the current classical day Bible, you're told that when the angel appears, he sounds like sort of waterfalls, like a great, like water. You see, because there is a mystery behind. So, the paradise, what is the paradise? Because some people, of course, because of their lack of knowledge and because they are not mandated, don't know exactly what is the paradise. But Zulassam revealed to us the hidden face of the paradise. So what is the paradise? Because we know the earth that we see is physical, is visible. So like me, for example, you see me, is physical. Now, there's a soul that you don't see, and there is a spirit that also is not seen. Because the soul and the body, they live in sort of different dimension, but they're still connected. It's the same thing for the earth. The earth that we see is the physical, is like the physical body of the earth. But there's also an astral body, and so a sort of soul. So the soul and a spirit. And the paradise is Wase spirit. So the spirit of the earth. That's what the paradise is. Wase spirit. So Dubise became an entity. He was above the notion of God. He was above the so-called God of the Bible, of the current day Bible, the God of all the religions out there, the fake religions. He became an entity. Because when they so-called try to draw or show pictures of that fake Jesus, you'll see just a regular man, and people are worshiping him. They'll try to so-called try to draw their fake God, and they're worshiping it, an image, fake images. But Dubise became an entity, and they knew that they couldn't put that in the current classical day Bible, because what Dubise had become was above that fake Jesus, was above the fake God of that the people worship currently, the fake gods that people worship. That's why because they will be worshiping Dubise, they will be worshiping Enoch if they put his transformation and who he had become, because he was superior to those fake gods in the visible that the fake religions worship. He's had become above the so-called Jesus that never existed. But what even the fake Christian have in their mind as their God, Dubise had become more than that. Verse 1090. I, Dubise, was thus purified and stripped of the condition of the visible. So he was stripped of the condition of the visible. He was purified. So to enter the great order of things, you need an appropriate body. Because in the physical visible, you need also an appropriate body to experience this reality. Same thing for the astral plane, and it's the same thing for the great order of things. You need an appropriate body to experience that reality. And you also need the appropriate consciousness, the conscience. So his consciousness changes. In the Current Classical Day Bible, in Matthew 16:33 says this. He says that, like the fake Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concern of God, but merely human concern." So I'm taking this verse to try to represent to you how the consciousness has to change. Because at that period in time in the Current Classical Day Bible, Peter had the consciousness and the feelings, the mind, so his thought were those of men. And Satan also has, as is mentioned in the Current Classical Day Bible, the thoughts of mankind, of people. That's how he also reflects. But to enter the great order of things, those consciousness, that consciousness, those, so the feelings, everything of the visible has to change, has to disappear. That's why he says that all memories will be removed. So, how is it then for the entities? The entities, they are perfect. They don't change. They are complete. It's not like the entity, for example, is going to think about this today. I'm going to use the word today just so we can understand. And then the next day, another thought. And then, because, for example, men, today you'll be thinking about eating, about doing this, that. You see, constantly, what's on your mind is changing. What you have this worry here, that worry there. You want a project, you're doing a project, you're doing this and that. Constantly it changes, and what you have in your mind change. But the entities, they are not like that. They are complete, they're perfect. They don't change their thoughts, they're complete. Now, that was Enoch, Dubise, who had known the ascension. We know that Moto and Muto also were taken, meaning they did not know physical death. Same for Busi, who is currently known in the current classical day Bible as Moses. Same for Be, who is known as Eli or Elijah, but is Eli. And some people will say, why were they special? Why is there some people that know the ascension, that are taken, that do not experience physical death, and others do? Is it because if, let's say, you experience physical death, does that mean that spiritually you are weak? We're going to take, for example, here in Mukaisedi, so Daniel chapter 13, verse 13, he says, "And at his approach I was frightened. Immediately he reassured me and said to me, 'Do not be afraid, son of Moto, walk towards your end. You will rest in the stay of the initiates, and you will stand for your inheritance at the end of days.'" Period. So Mukaisedi, who was an initiate, his inheritance were to be given to him at the end of days. So he had to rest and wait. But Enoch, Busi, Moto and Muto, Pongise, though they already had their inheritance, they took it already. So why is there exception for some and other no exception? That's also why Jokisabe, the true Christ, came, because he experienced physical death, and he was not spiritually weak, you see, because he was also bringing that knowledge that the initiates, even if they die physically, spiritually they're not dead. That's why even in the current classical day Bible it says, whoever believes in me will live even when he is dead. Because the believers who are in the faith, the initiates that walk according to the word, to the verb, and put in practice, they will be conscious. They will go in the state of the dead, of the initiates, where they will be conscious. That's why we have to transcend our consciousness, our conscience. The earth is like a learning field. We are here to learn, to experience, to grow. For example, when you were younger, you had a certain consciousness, a certain way of seeing things. And the more you grow up, you see things differently, your perspective change, your consciousness change. So we are in learning. We are in learning to transcend our consciousness and to have the consciousness like the initiates had. To put in practice the law, to obey the commandment, and to transcend of our way of seeing things, to be able to obtain l'ongela buindea, which is eternal life. So Mukai se dit, Daniel will have that life at the end. And if we believe in what the teacher is saying to us, the teacher is Zulula San, and we walk and put in practice everything we are learning, we also, at the end of days, will have that inheritance in the spiritual. So that was the Ascension of Enoch. All glory to Loba, the unique creator.